First moment I saw Cape Otway, I thought, wow, look at this expanse of water, beautiful views, lovely outcrop, beautiful lighthouse. But one of the first things that greeted you when you got out of the car was that lovely southerly wind hitting straight in the face off the coast. And I thought to myself, I wonder what sort of a night we're in for. On this investigation, there was myself, the team leader, Jose, our tech manager, Di, the alternative, and Alison, who was still learning the ropes of the whole thing. We also had a couple of guest investigators, Cindy. Cindy was one of the workers at the lighthouse, along with Mark Morris. He was our psychic for the evening. Built in 1848, this lighthouse represented a beacon for all those ships coming across Bass Strait. Some of the convict ships, some of the first settler ships. Now you imagine life aboard a convict ship. You've been at sea for many, many, many weeks. The first sign of land that you're going to see in the dark is that beacon of light, which is the Cape Otway Lighthouse. For without it, you really haven't got much hope. You have very little chance of survival.
I was a lighthouse keeper from 1985 to 1995 until lighthouses were decommissioned and lighthouse keepers were made redundant. Our job role here was to do the maintenance and to make sure the light come on every night and was turned off every morning. When I lived in this house, we had to do weather observations every 3 hours from 3 o'clock in the morning through to 9 p.m. at night. And when I used to leave this house at 3 in the morning or 9 at night, as I was walking over to the weather room, I always sort of felt the hair in the back of my neck standing up. Felt like there was a presence there. It never bothered me, but I often remember feeling that eerie presence. Well, this is the oldest remaining lighthouse on the Australian mainland. It was built here in 1848. And the reason it was put here is because of a lot of shipwrecks hitting King Island. Over 1,000 lives were lost in two wreckages, a ship called the Neva, 1835, 250 odd female convicts and their children drowned when the captain hit the northeastern side of King Island. When the lighthouse was built, it was actually cut out of the local sandstone at the Parker River, or Point Franklin, about 5 miles from here. It was all hand cut. It took 70 people 10 months, including 20 stonemasons. The apparatus up the top, it's all from Chance Brothers, from the dome. It was all made at Chance Brothers near Birmingham in England. And the particular ones that are here now were put there in 1888, well, handmade in 1888 and installed in 1891. These sandstone slabs are actually hand cut over at Point Franklin in the Parker River. And if you look at the markings on them, they're all cut by hand cut by stonemasons, and these different markings indicate the different person that done them. They all have their own sort of signature.
So, Pat, what's the story with these brass legs?
When the lighthouse was built in 1848, they were burning whale oil up here. They were using whale oil as a form of light. So to supply that whale oil flame with oxygen, the old lighthouse keepers could open and close those to get the air coming in and sucking up over the flames to get the biggest, brightest flame possible without smoke. We had a series of weights in here like that. That was suspended on a cable that ran down through the middle of the tower. There was a clockwork mechanism in here, and under the grandfather clock principle, gravity pulled the weight down through the tower after the lighthouse keeper had wound it up, would pull it down through the tower, and this clockwork mechanism would all revolve around. It would revolve that middle piece of pipe, and in turn the prism would start rotating.
So, Pat, visibility up here on the lighthouse. What sort of visibility range have you got on a really clear day?
A really clear day, you can see probably 40 to 50 kilometres. Today it's a bit hazy. It's probably only down to about 25, 30.
And some of the extreme conditions, I mean, I guess you guys will get some really extreme weather at times.
When the wind gets up around 70 knots, and it's very, very hard to even stand up out here then, but that's when lighthouses are at their best. Mm. When it's bad weather, when it's stormy, horizontal rain, huge winds, huge seas picking up and spray getting blown up high.
And these babies will always stand that test of time, won't they?
This has stood the test of time, and it'll outlast that little Tupperware one down the front.
I think it might, yeah.
The original cable, telegraph cable, was put in 1859 from Tasmania, linking Tasmania to the Australian mainland with a subsea telegraph cable. And since then, it lasted about 18 months before it was totally abandoned. And then after that, the Basslink cable now actually goes through Cape Schanck. So that's been there for that length of time. But the telegraph station itself, which is what that building was built for, to house that cable back in 1859, that's where some of the stories are. We've been here for 4 years, and the sort of experiences that the visitors have had, because we have accommodation here, has been quite varied, but also very similar. I mean, the one for this house here, the assistant keeper's house, always talks about this lady that sits on the edge of the bed, or hearing of soothing music. Also comforting, warmth of in the bed. They'd be laying in the bed there and it'd be very warm, and they'd think the electric blanket was faulty, so they'd turn it down and it'd still be warm, and then they'd take the thing out of the wall and turn the whole thing off, and still throughout the night it'd be this warmth coming through the bed.
And walking up and down.
Yeah, and hearing walking up and down.
In the kitchen, opening and closing the cupboards and things like that. Yeah, that's a continual too, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all different people, but the same sort of thing. And even some of our staff that stay overnight, some of them don't like staying in this building either because of those experiences. But they're always warmth and comforting. They're not like scary experiences or anything like that. And we think it was actually a lady called Mrs. Riches who was living here in 1890 as an assistant keeper's wife. They had four or five kids, and then the fifth one, they seemed to think she was suffering from postnatal depression. And so she was classed as insane in those days because it wasn't a diagnosable thing in those days. So she was taken off to the Sunbury Mental Asylum, where she spent 20 years and died in the asylum. So the thoughts are that she came back because this is the last place she was happy. And yeah, a lot of people experience her, and some people have seen her in the windows and things like that, and they've seen her dressed in grey, and these are all totally different people. Other experiences people have had is at the telegraph station. And that building was renovated about 3 years ago, and the guy doing the renovations at that time, he experienced things every morning of the smelling of bacon and eggs cooking. And there's also a room in the back where people are going into that room and they feel this coldness or feel this energy. And they open the cupboard door there, and some people have actually felt shocked by the energy coming out of the door. This is the way they describe it to us. Our house and where the office is, it's connected by the phone system, an intercom system.
Yeah.
And there was one night when the phone was ringing from this building here, and then it just rang all night.
We
into
closed
the
the phone system down so that nobody could call, so if there was any calls coming it couldn't happen, and yet it still kept ringing all night long.
There's these internal phones there again, the old style ring phones. And they've been disconnected for ages, but a lot of people still hear them ringing, and likewise in the telegraphs, in the head keeper's house.
They ring in the head light keeper's accommodation from the lighthouse, and when there's no one there, and it's impossible because it's got to be wound up.
The story of Frederick Valentich is what's known as Australia's most fascinating aviation mystery, I guess, and that occurred on the 21st of October 1978, and he was a young pilot that was doing his cross-country leg from Moorabbin, and he was flying over to King Island. And they used to use the Otway light and the Cape as like a last drop-off point before they did the sea crossing to King Island, because this is the shortest distance. And I was on that night when he disappeared totally without trace, and the radio transcripts are sort of like coming out with stories like, well, there's this light above me and it's not another plane, and it's hovering above me and it's following me, and this sort of thing. And the radio transcripts, when you listen to them, are quite haunting, because he's obviously freaking out by this sort of experience, because he can't explain it, and it's also not on the radars of the air traffic controllers and things. And then he just disappeared off the radar and off the radio, and there's never anything found of his plane. There's no wreckage found, or no nothing basically.
The American ship Eric the Red, it ran aground here in 1880 on the Otway Reef, just in front of the lighthouse. It was coming from America. It was bound for Melbourne, and in Melbourne they were just having the 1880 World Expo. The exhibition building had just been built in Melbourne, and it was full of every mod con America had to offer of the time. It was all in flat boxes, and it has been written that the exhibition building was quite depleted. And they also say that a lot of the fishing villages between here and Port Phillip Heads had all the mod cons that America had on offer. The boxes floated ashore and they got all the gear out of them. The most famous shipwreck probably around here was the Lockhart. And that really, the only two people survived on that, Eva Carmichael and Tom Pearce. They were the only survivors, become very famous survivors, and that shipwreck just about spent the end of sail. England were receiving shocking images of shipwrecks out here, and people weren't really keen on emigrating on the sailing ships, so steam virtually took over from about then onwards.
Another story that comes to mind was of a postman that came from Colac all the way down to where we are now, right here at Cape Otway. That was his run. He used to bring the mail in once a week. One particular time, it was a nice stormy night. He'd been on the road for many, many hours, pulled into the lighthouse station, went into the lighthouse itself and spent the night under the stairs. Now, during the night, he was awoken by what he called a grey lady, a lady coming down the stairs towards him, to which he panicked. He got on his horse, shot off, took off back to Colac and never did the mail run again. And back in 1846, there was a massacre at Blanket Bay, which is just around the corner here from Cape Otway. Now, it was assumed that a man named George Smythe, who was contracted to survey the Otways just before the lighthouse was built, was out on an expedition when one of his party, by the name of Conroy, was murdered by the Blacks, as they were known as back then. Smythe returned back to Melbourne and organised a retaliatory attack, and he massacred many Indigenous people. According to the Daily Telegraph, there was a report in 1846, August in fact, that stated that Conroy, one of Smythe's men, had interfered with an Indigenous woman who was married, which resulted in his death.
The reason why Cape Otway Light Station is the most significant light station in Australia is pure and simply back in the 1830s, 1840s, when shipping was coming into Australia to emigrate, with immigrants coming to Australia. This was the landfall, this was the first sighting of land for those ships, and it cut days off the journey. Ships didn't have to no longer go around Tasmania. They could cut 3 or 4 days by taking this shortcut through Bass Strait. But it is only 88 kilometres wide between here and King Island, and it was known as threading the eye of the needle, or the funnel. And ships' captains that had been at sea for 3, 4, maybe even 5 months without seeing any land, this really was a big deal to get through this passage, and it was known as the Beacon of Hope, because once they saw the lighthouse, once that was put in 1848, then it was really that significant that ship's captains brought their crew and the complement of the ship on deck and saying, look, there it is, Cape Otway, what we've spent the last 3, 4 months sailing for and the last 2 or 3 days looking for, because they hadn't seen land since they left their home port. After the gold rush, after the 1850s, there was up to 70, 80 ships a day passing through the Cape here. And it got to that stage that communication, they needed to prepare in Melbourne for these ships coming through. So the building behind us here, the telegraph station, was put in place to signal those ships, which is why I've got the flags up here, to signal the ships as they went by, and they would add vital communication and then telegraph that information onto Melbourne. Before the telegraph station was here, it used to take about 5 or 6 days to send a message from Hobart Town to Port Jackson into Melbourne, or Port Jackson at Sydney there. Once the telegraph station came in, it was a matter of minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, to send a message from Hobart onto Melbourne. Australia's worst peacetime maritime disaster, the Cataraqui, in 1845 was wrecked on King Island, and 400 lives were lost on that single night. And it was really after that major disaster that the ship, or the naval authorities and the colony here, were screaming out for the lighthouse to be built, and that's why Cape Otway was put in place in 1848. This building was built in 1859 to house a cable from Tasmania to the mainland, and it was also used as a signal tower, and there was actually a bigger tower up higher. And they used to go up the tower here, and this is the old picture of it here, and they'd signal the ships coming through and send off the information back to Melbourne. And this is the telegraph office itself through here. So this is the telegraph office itself, and the telegraph operator would be sitting in here, and they'd have the signalman running up the stairwell there up into the tower, and they'd be shouting out instructions to the guy on the flags, and they'd get the information from the flags from the ship and then telegraph it onto Geelong, then onto Melbourne. And eventually it'd end up all the way back to New York or London, wherever the home ship came or where the ship's home was. And if we look at some of these pictures here, this is sort of like what the flags would have looked like. And the reason why Cape Otway is so important is looking at these big clipper ships. These had up to 300-400 people coming on them. And there was 60, 70 of these a day in the times of the gold rush. So, I mean, it was a huge shipping lane. And one of the greatest peaks in Victorian immigration was really at that time, and they were all coming past here at Cape Otway. And the reason it's so important is it's quite hard to see on this picture, but this is Antarctica. And what happens is ships would leave Northern Europe or North America, and they'd skirt as close as they dared to Antarctica. And their first sight, and this is Tasmania here, so they're trying to find that gap there. So you can see on that, that's why it was known as thread in the eye of the needle or a funnel. You know, 88 kilometres sounds like a great distance to us, but when you haven't seen land for 3 months, you know, that gap is quite narrow, which is why this is the shipwrecked coast, because, you know, alas, they all didn't find Cape Otway. And they literally just sailed into Australia and got wrecked along the coastline. It's this building here and this cupboard that we believe an infant child was kept for a few days after she died of whooping cough. And the story goes that she was kept in the cupboard for a few days because a doctor was going to come and try and ascertain what the cause of death was, because there's a lot of kids here at that time and they didn't really know why she died or things like that. So she was stored in the cupboard here. And we get a lot of stories from people that just come to the front entrance and say, what's the story with this room or this building? Because we open the cupboard door here and they feel this, like, you know, energy. And you know, I mean, I'm not a believer, I guess, but I even felt something now. It is cold and it's drafty, and other people sort of, you know, opened the door and, you know, felt something and closed it again. And people have had photos that they've taken, and all the photos in this building haven't worked, but all the other ones around the site have. Yes, the way the house is set up now is just as a visual museum, and the theme behind it is looking in, looking out. And we get about 90,000 visitors a year here, so we have these panels on, so that when people are walking past the windows, they can look in as though they're looking into the parlour room, which is what this room was. So.
It's lovely, it's very effective.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And at night it adds on a whole different dimension, so you're gonna have a great time tonight wandering around.
Yes, can't wait, can't wait.
What we've got here, Di, this is Joseph Edward Kelsall, and he was the first telegraph operator here. There's many interesting stories with this guy and the head keeper, because these guys were the white-collar workers of the day, you know, they were the IT gurus, and so they were getting paid a lot more money than the head keepers were, which really upset the light keepers, because, you know, the light keepers are up all night, you know, dangerous, hot, dusty, smelly work with the oil lamps. And these guys, as far as the light keepers were concerned, were just tapping out gossip mongering among the airwaves, you know, by day, and you know, had very sociable hours. So there's a bit of the, you know, rivalry between the two camps. Yeah. But the sad thing about Joseph Kelsall here is he's got a child buried in the cemetery, and there was an infant death, and we believe it was just a natural causes of either whooping cough or pneumonia or something along those lines. But some of his relatives came back here a couple of years ago when we reopened the telegraph station, and they live in Western Australia, and for them it was a very poignant moment sitting at the telegraph station in this building, but then going off to the cemetery where they were sitting by the graves of, you know, their ancestors, which is, yeah, they found it quite emotional. So Di, this is a good etching of the lamp, the whale oil lamp on the original tower. So everything from the balcony up there, that's the old whale oil lamp, and there was 21 whale oil burners up there, each with a parabolic reflector behind them. And that gave 3 beams of light, because they're arranged in 3 groups of 7. So yeah, it's a great indication of what the whale oil burner looked like. And yeah, the tower's original, but after 1891, it was changed out into the new lamp that we've got now. So.
We had an experience over in the telegraph house when we were living here. The person that lived here before us, they heard a noise over there one night about just on dusk, so they've gone to investigate, and they found the east window on a particular room over there that most reports come out have had a broken window and a pool of blood in the middle of the room. And there was no stones, there wasn't any birds or animals, or there was no blood on the window. Weird thing happened one night. We were asleep in this very room. This was our bedroom, and a bottle of my wife's mousse, her hair, stuff she puts in her hair, exploded. Late of an afternoon, when you're sitting up there, the crowds are gone, and you can still hear footsteps, like people or someone climbing the tower. You hear the footsteps on the coming up the steps. People that stay here, they write in the visitors book that things are happening, lights come on and off, you know, things rattle and go bang in the night. But you know, like as Cindy said, there's nothing bad's ever happened.
Previously on Haunted Australia.
As I was walking over to the weather room, it felt like there was a presence there.
This house here, the assistant keeper's house, always talks about this lady that sits on the edge of the bed or hearing of soothing music. Our house and where the office is, it's connected by the phone system, an intercom system.
Yeah.
And there was one night when the phone was ringing from this building here, and then it just rang all night.
We
into
closed
the
the
office.
phone system down so that nobody could call, so if there was any calls coming it couldn't happen, and yet it still kept ringing.
It's this building here and this cupboard that we believe an infant child was kept for a few days after she died of whooping cough. And we get a lot of stories from people that just come to the front entrance and say, what's the story with this room or this building? Because we open the cupboard door here and they feel this energy. And, I mean, I'm not a believer, I guess, but I even felt something now. It's cold and it's drafty, and other people sort of opened the door and felt something and closed it again. And people have had photos that they've taken, and all the photos in this building haven't worked, but all the other ones around the site have.
And now Haunted Australia continues.
Well, Mark, we're about to go into the telegraph station. This building's pretty old, as you can see. We've already gone and done our sweep already, our baseline sweep. We're going to bring you in just to see what we can pick up with you, just from an alternative point of view, to help us correlate our findings.
Yep.
All right.
All
so
right.
we'll go in and wait. So
Okay.
tell me what you pick up.
Okay.
What are you picking anything up around this
Yeah,
area?
straight away as soon as I came in, I felt family orientated. I feel a lady in her mid-30s, small children, and a man. He says his name's Martin. I'm getting Martin from the man.
Martin, is it?
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Are you just getting like a residual feeling
Yeah,
around?
this is sort of like a retreat for them, a family environment.
Okay.
on there.
This Martin guy, would he have been like a husband, father figure?
Yeah, he would have been the father. He would have been
Okay.
the father.
All right. Well, we'll keep moving, and,
Okay.
and if we come across anything that you want to stop and tell
Yep.
me about, by all means, just do that.
Okay, we'll do that.
All right.
I'd like to go into this room actually.
This room?
Yep.
All right.
And energy here. I'm not actually picking up what it is, but I just feel very. I don't think I actually feel peaceful about it either in this particular room.
So there is an energy
Yeah,
here that's
yeah.
not very peaceful.
Yeah, I don't feel peaceful about it.
Does it have a gender, or is it just an energy at this stage?
Male. It's definitely
It is male?
Yeah, definitely male. Not picking up much more about this room.
Okay. What when you say it's not peaceful, as in, what is it, disruptive?
It seems to be disruptive. It's a disruptive spirit.
Okay.
It's not peaceful. I can't put my finger on what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll come back later on
Yeah.
and see what else we can pick up.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, we'll keep on moving.
Okay. This room I feel was quite peaceful and quite
There's nothing.
nothing that I can get my hands on. Very peaceful, that room. Oh. First I like to go to this room.
Being drawn to this room.
This room.
All right.
This room has got a lot of energy in it. There's lots of activity in here. Really worth the investigation in this room.
Okay. What sort of activity are you picking up? Is it very busy, or is it
It's
just?
busy. It's actually busy. It's quite.
It's a busy room. Isn't
Yeah.
it? What sort of spirit are you picking up? Like, as in, I mean, I don't want to lead you into
Yeah,
an answer, but
okay.
what do you?
There seem male. There seems to be quite a bit of male energy in here.
Okay.
There's always some sort of drawing room or study. It must have been at some stage. Just seems a lot of male activity.
Okay.
Very worth the investigation.
I'll be perfectly honest. I don't feel very comfortable in this room. I'm not a psychic by any means, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel particularly comfortable in here.
No.
Might be just me. It might be. I don't know. We'll have to find out later on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But
Worth-
yeah, definitely not. For me, it's not comfortable either.
Good.
All right. Well, then we'll make our way out towards the front section again.
Yep.
And if you feel you want to stop.
Okay. Just laughing and playing and happiness in here.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
happiness.
Yep. Very good. Very good. It could be worth the investigation on this room too.
Okay. Well, we'll
We'll keep going.
keep on moving.
Very good.
Well, what we'll do, we're just about out to the front door now. We've got a little bit of feedback from yourself.
Yep.
We've got some information that we're going to go back and correlate,
Yep.
see what we can find. And then later on in the evening,
Yeah.
we'll all come back here and we'll start setting up different vigils to see what we get.
Okay.
And hopefully between yourself and us,
Yep.
we'll come up with something.
Something good.
All right,
All right.
let's head back to the others.
Okay. Let's do it.
What we're going to do now is go through the house and go into the individual rooms, and we'll cross-reference what we picked up this afternoon and see if we've got anything that lines up from both teams.
At the moment, what I want to do is just correlate what we've got so far. There's some interesting variations that the girls got and what you and I got earlier on in the day. In particular, the room down the back, you know where the typewriter is. Yeah. Jose and I, when we went in there, we felt really uncomfortable just being in there. Okay. Nothing came up on the readings of the EMF and temperature, but it was a bit uncomfortable. And I've also noticed that you had on there that your rods crossed. Yeah. I know we're sort of crossing a fair bit.
Different places in that particular room.
So you got a hit there, we've got a hit there. I took Mark through earlier, and when Mark walked into the room, the first thing he said is, well, there's a lot of energy in this room. So with that in mind, that's one particular room I really want to look in and possibly even do a vigil in. We've got other little bits and pieces here. We've got the hallway where the cupboards are. The supposed girl was kept in the cupboard. Again, we didn't get any reading from the baseline testing, but Mark actually did pick something up in there too. Okay. So with these few little bits and pieces that we've correlated here, we'll just cross-reference those. I'm pretty sure we've got somewhere to start anyway. Okay. All right. Well, let's organise ourselves.
No worries. What I'm going to do now is go into this room here, which we're told there's a spirit of a young girl in here. So I'm going to set up my trigger objects, which I have a little horse and a bright ball. And I bought a car also because I wasn't sure of the gender, so I'll just put that on anyway. So I'm just going to sprinkle some flour on this tray, set up my objects, and then of course when we come back to check them, we'll know if they've been moved or not. Put an object down there and you come back to look at it, it is very obvious as to whether it's been moved or not. So we either use the flour or we draw around the object, but I prefer to use this because it's more effective.
When you hear us talk about terms like blowouts in a camera, what that's really saying there is we've got a lot of LEDs, infrared LEDs around this camera. In a small area, that light will bounce off of every object you can find and it will throw it straight back at the camera, hence giving it a blowout. It's blown the picture right out of proportion. So that's what we term as a blowout.
What I've got here is a Sony Mini DV video camera. Now these come equipped with infrared lighting, but what I've got here is an illuminator. It gives me probably about 5 to 6 times more range than what this does, and we'll be needing this to see in the dark.
Now you might notice we like to use dowsing rods. Dowsing rods are a great tool, they do help us. However, the skeptical part of me and the scientific part of me says there may be influence there from others' hands. I designed and built a device to hold those divining rods, so there's no influence from anybody. You can't physically move them. Hopefully that's going to get us some results too. What we're going to do right now is we're going to kill the lights. We want to film in total darkness. We want to use some infrared gear, and I feel we'll get some more positive results if we're in the dark. It's just there's no particular reason other than it's dark and it's quiet, and it gives us a good base to work on. Be very, very silent. We're about to do a completely silent vigil. It's a communication vigil without communication verbally. So on the count of 3, total silence, alright? 1, 2, 3. Can you make a noise for us? Can you make a sound of some sort so we know you're here? If that's you making that tapping noise, rumbling noise, can you do it again? outside?
It's the window.
It is. If there's anyone here with us at the moment, can you make a tapping noise somewhere else other than the window so we can hear you? Do you want us to leave? Tap on something if you're scared of us and you don't want us here. Maybe touch one of us.
The rods are doing something really strange.
Something shaky?
No.
What are they doing, Di?
Can't you hear them?
I can hear a noise.
It's like they're stuck together and they're tapping.
Rods don't stick together and tap.
Oh, they are.
If you want us to leave, move these rods on the floor.
That's a pretty definite tapping, don't you think?
If you can move these ones, I will be impressed. You can move those ones. Try moving these ones. Come on, give it a go. They're not going to hurt you. Come on, push them. Move them. Show us what you've got. If you've got anything at all.
Sorry, it's me.
Are we getting any movement out of the ones off the floor?
No.
Nothing. After conducting the experiment with Mark, he was holding on to the rig that I made. He was concentrating with all his might and he could not make those rods move. Doesn't mean to say that they didn't move overall for the night, doesn't mean that they don't work, but it just leaves you thinking, is there really some human interference or influence with those rods?
This lens was put in here in 1890. It weighs about 3.5 tonne and it's floated on a bed of mercury.
So has anybody seen anything paranormal in here?
People have seen a man and they think it perhaps is a past assistant keeper, Bill Evans.
Okay.
And he was here for on and off over a 30-year period. And this is Howard. He was a tour guide here. And when he passed, he wanted his ashes left here at the lighthouse. When we have guests and we put the light on for them to light it up, and we used to have to go down and turn the light off. And I went down one night to turn the light off, went into the lighthouse, turned it off, came back out, shut the door, and the handle was going the other way, was being pulled the other way, and I had to pull it to keep it locked, or keep it shut so I could lock it, but it was being really forcibly pulled the other way. I get chased out of the lighthouse on a regular basis. When I come down the steps, I feel somebody behind me, and it's like behind me, and I think this is a great place to visit and to stay over. It's such a beautiful location. But yeah, there is activity here, and I think you need to be aware of that.
Something that struck me as odd is when we were in the telegraph station walking through a particular hallway, it felt like you were dizzy or you were out of balance. I couldn't quite work out why. Then I looked down low and saw the floor. The floor was undulating. It was all over the place. So it was at that point I got a laser level, shot it along the floor, and you could clearly see the reason why you felt so unbalanced. The night was a good night overall. Jose and myself were very clinical in our approach. We approached things definitively. We were looking for a particular thing. We even used a bit of provocation. Now, we couldn't do that with the ghost of a young girl. It would be disrespectful. So the girls, Di and Cindy, they were using their own intuition to try and contact a spirit of a child as a mother.
We're at Cape Otway transfer station, and I'm sitting in one of the rooms where a little girl apparently was kept in a cupboard for 3 days after she died, and her spirit's been seen around here quite a lot. So I'm just sitting here doing a vigil on my own to see if we can get any reaction of any kind. I must admit, since everybody's left the room except myself, it's got very, very cold. So I'm just going to sit here for a few minutes and see if I can have some kind of communication with the girl that's in here. If there's somebody here and you'd like to communicate with me, please give me a sign. Tap on the wall, the chair, tap me on the shoulder. Just something to let me know that you'd like to communicate. Don't seem to be getting much response at this stage. But what we'll do is come back into this room a little bit later, and I'm going to set up some trigger objects to see if we can get some kind of response.
What was that? What was that?
There's something there.
Where are you looking exactly?
Did you guys hear something back here?
Yeah, I did hear that out there. There's something there.
In here?
And I felt something, I don't know, touch my leg or, I don't know.
Sorry, that was me.
I'm convinced, yeah, there is something there in that doorway. Absolutely.
So what did you feel?
I just got very cold on the side of my body because I was standing there. And I just feel like someone's standing next to me, but then something really, really cold touched my leg back here. Or not touched my leg, touched my pants.
I was walking over here and I was just snapping a few shots of the lighthouse, and as the flash went off I saw a flash in the sky and I sort of took no notice of it. I actually thought it was just a shooting star, but it's like it came out from behind the clouds again and just another big flash, so it was just interesting what it was. I'm not actually sure what it was. Could have been a shooting star, but don't know.
When I first met Paul and his wife, instantly I knew not only were these people great hosts, but they had a passion. They had a passion like me to preserve our history, to look after these buildings and to pass on those stories. So on behalf of our team, I say thank you to Paul and his wife for a fantastic and interesting day and evening. Denise and Cindy, thanks for having us here at Cape Otway. We've had a great night. We've had some good personal experiences as well. And on behalf of the Haunted Australia team, we'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. It's been wonderful having you here.
Thank you.
It's been really good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Great.
You're welcome.
Thanks.